Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to talk about Agile Impact and what Agile Pods means and how we have evolved this methodology and how we work at Globant. First, I'm going to talk a minute about who we are for the people that don't know us. We generally produce, what we do is we create IP for our clients. Globant's a service company, and we generally, whatever we create has a high consumer facing, so very rich UIs in multiple platforms. So, Globant has design and engineering teams working together to deliver experiences and building these experiences from the very concept to implementation of the state. So what we say is like we're a new breed because generally, at the end of the spectrum, you get engineering, and at the other end, you get design. We combine those, and that way, through Agile Methodologies, we create products with speed, with quality, and with the impact on the audience that our clients envision. We are over 2,000 people, multiple countries, Latin America, a big footprint in the U.S. and Europe, and we work, as I said, with many consumer brands. Some of them are here in the client list. We're distributed. This is our coverage. Basically, shows our offices. We don't have to talk much about this. And basically, that little graph there on the right, you can see, how we have grown. The company has been growing very, very fast throughout the years, at about a 30% annually. And it's basically driven by the adoption of the approach of, customer-facing and multiple platform products from web, mobile, consoles, TVs, etc. So that kind of array of experience and kind of extent of experience allows us to create full product roadmaps for our clients. And then this is a little bit of how we are structured. In order to keep talent pure and evolving, we have created a structure that is composed of 8 studios. The studios are groups of people that are really specialized in technologies and trends. For example, mobile, big data, quality, gaming. When these teams work to create products or to sustain products, we assemble those teams in what we call pods, and that's what we're going to talk today. But the why we're explaining this is because the talent grows within the studio and is specific to the technology and the trend that the studio embraces, right? So mobile. We'll have mobile careers. Consumer experience has mostly e-commerce and content management talent in it. And yes, of course, we have all across the wheel here. We have Java and C++, and we have PHP and Python and Ruby talent, obviously, but it actually pertains to a particular technology subset within the ecosystem. And that's how we can create units of specialization of practices and grow those. Okay, and then basically we're just going to jump into the presentation right now. This is going to be about 20 minutes, and then Jason's going to talk about experiences using Agile Pods, real experiences. So that's very important. About 20 other minutes, and then we're going to have about 10 minutes of questions. So when we are creating products across platforms, glasses or web or watches or wearables, whatever you want to call it today, the complexity of that suite basically pushes for more innovative ways to think outside the box and move outside of the traditional waterfall, and also move outside of traditional Agile when the roadmaps imply very large teams, right? So how do you maintain innovation at scale? So that's what basically we're going to talk about this. And this is this is the type of product that we normally work. I mean, we work with bands. We've been doing that for years, and then you have to create digital products that interact with bands. It's not just only understanding the API of the band and how do you connect to it, but also understanding what experience that leverages. So that implies that the turnaround times from understanding what we're going to build, defining a concept, to building a prototype, to launching it to production and testing it and measuring it, and then modifying are much, much faster than what we're used to. So as the cycles get shorter and the iterations get higher, we need to think about how do we maintain, how to sustain those teams, and how those teams work at maximum velocity, outputting the best quality and still innovating, right? And what we have found is, like, we work with many companies. Some of them are more agile, some of them are less agile. Some of them release once every month, some of them release once every week, and some of them release a couple times a year, right? Generally what happens is that as companies want to embrace software and they understand they have to become somehow technology companies to connect to their audiences, to their new audience and new demographics, they generally create visual designs and UX groups to showcase, mock up, define, create content, and then prototype and test that content. One of the things that we've seen is that generally visual design and UX are groups that work a little bit far away from the delivery of technology, from the technology teams. So when this happens, visual design and UX move and create their little world. They create their concepts and they create their vision for the future, but they're disconnected from the development teams. Hence, this is the effect on the development team, right? What are these guys doing? What are they smoking, right? That's very common. The larger the organization, the more problematic this turns. So why? Because generally development is supposed to make it work. So the end result of these disjoint interactions is that we end up with a product that is very, very different from the vision that was created by the experience and the visual design teams. Why? Because basically visual designs and designers and user experience professionals, they basically create their experience, they work in isolation, they work with the users, then they toss it over the wall, and then somebody has to implement it. And the person on the teams that have to implement it, really, though maybe there's no technology for this available, maybe the response time is not what was intended, maybe the availability was not what was intended, and the product ends up being bad because it cannot execute properly. Maybe in many cases, assets change. Products need to be tuned down, and tuned down means that it's just basically a low quality product. So obviously think about if the developer is puzzled about what he has to build, how the clients or budget stakeholders are going to be. Well, there you see, not very happy, right? It's fun here, but generally, when you see it like this, and in large proportions, a lot of money is burned, a lot of budgets are consumed, and very little value is delivered when these teams work disjoint. So what we proposed is working at scale and basically keeping innovation at scale, not destroying innovation at scale. The first principle is let's work together. And that's the principle of the creation of the pod. The pod basically, and you see a cell here, is a unit, a team composed of 7, 8, 10 max individuals. More than 10 is difficult for the lead team to create. And as every cell, right, there is a core. You see the core very well down there, I think. What is the core? The core is the people within the team that embrace our client culture. They understand the business domain. They understand the technology stack that they inherit. They understand the product that they have to build. It's that team that make it happen. The rest could be more junior guys, not necessarily. They could be people that are just starting in that pod. Generally, a good proportion is to have a 40% core members within a pod. And this is the key for scalability, because then when the pod needs to become 2 pods, instead of creating a new unit of all new people, what we do is we create a cell, another cell, that has some of the core members from the previous, from the first pod, and that's how we multiply. Instead of going with, okay, let's ramp up this team, all new people working on technologies they don't know, working on technology stacks from the client that they don't understand, we start small and then we really quickly grow bigger, right? You can start with 2 or 3 pods, but doing something very, with a scope that's very well known, right? And then as time goes by, month 1, month 2, month 3, then these cells start replicating, and obviously velocity, it doesn't suffer as much as it would if we were just putting people and adding bodies to teams that have no form. Another rule of the pod is that they still, I mean, the pod has at least feature cohesion. What is this? I mean, they have to be able to deliver at least a complete product feature if it's not a product. Let's say, you know, a team requires, just to make it simple, we need about 20 people to develop a product. Well, let's cut the teams in 3, that 20 people team in 2 or 3, and then let's give these teams specific responsibility towards story sets or features, okay? So that's the key principle. These teams don't just take tasks. They are responsible and they develop know-how and experience around a particular feature. There's some pillars of the pod model. One of the things is just to scale a pod, we need to create an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem is a set. It's like it's a community of pods working together and tied by their dependencies, what they owe to each other, right? That's how they communicate. And obviously backed and supported by a group of product management, technical architects that are function as the backbone to create that standardization to, you know, basically use consistent technologies when we are creating large projects, right? When we're creating large products, sorry. Maturity is how do you keep that particular pod or set of pods motivated? How do you measure them? How do you know that a pod is more efficient or effective than another pod? So there has to be a model that basically measures whatever they're doing on a day-to-day basis and gates entry points and levels to assess what kind of maturity that pod has. The higher the maturity, the better the velocity, the better quality, the more efficiency and productivity overall of that pod within the ecosystem. And obviously that's a leading pod. That's a pod that if you split, you can create a very powerful pod from that one. And the other aspect is how do you keep the fun in this model, right? These two are, you know, the ecosystem is about structure, the maturity is about evolution, and the game mechanics is about fun. It's about exposure, it's about motivation. How do you keep the team motivated? How do you really detect who are the best players within pods without actually measuring the individual? Because what we measure here is the team. We don't care about the individual, we care about the team. But people care about themselves. So how do you expose the merit? How do you basically promote good behavior? How do you promote efficiency, right? That's all about game mechanics. Instead of doing it by, you know, grabbing people and putting in a room and just giving them money, we just make it public, we make it fun. And then obviously, as the higher the maturity is, the team members of that pod get, reap the benefits of that maturity. It's just, they get better perks and they get, better bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. So, basically that way we try to align our own goals with our client goals. And within teams, if let's say, you're not using a partner like Globant within the company, that obviously can be implemented as well in a very similar way. So as I was speaking, how do we build an ecosystem? So generally, the ecosystem is built by what we call pod mitosis, which is, we grab one mature pod and we split it into two, and we create two. We create a new pod that has some of the DNA of the first pod, and that's how we create that community, and that's how we scale it, right? And the pod understands the basic functionality of their systems, and obviously they can teach the new and the beginner members of that pod on how the client works and how, what is the vision of the product, et cetera, et cetera. Then, we need to, very nice seed in a kind of a cell, an organism, a very organic way, the last slide, but, how do you actually organize this in a team? And, our idea is that, if you see this org chart is a little bit non-conventional, a conventional organizational chart would be flipped, right, if you see it that way. But we don't want to do it that way because we think that the pod level is the most important of the structure. And the pod level is supported, is not mandated, it's supported by a portfolio leadership that makes sure that there is consistency across. There is consistency from a product standpoint with a product manager there, that there is consistency from an architectural standpoint with a technical director coordinating the activities of those pods. And generally what we call a portfolio is a feature set. Example, there are sets of pods specialized in search, set of pods specialized in shopping cart, there are sets of pods specialized in analytics, monetization, right? It just depends on what your product is about. And there are certain pods obviously specialized in sustainment, right? Keeping that product alive after it's launched. So it's the whole array of, similar features grouped together and coordinated by this central backbone that we call portfolio leadership. That's the way we want to see it. We don't want to see it flipped, where, the pod receives orders from technical architects and product managers. That should not be the way. Basically, it's supported. It's a different way of seeing the organizational structure. And of course, the program leadership has generally components. They're mostly clients here in our case, a technical director, a program manager, and a general manager that, basically they would create a vision and they support the Podified structure with the vision and obviously with budget to be able to execute, and obviously measure generically how the program is doing overall. We're going to see a little bit about metrics later on in the following slides. Some lessons learned about pod distribution. Basically, in this case, we have three locations. We have, as you see, we have an e-commerce pod and CMS pod in Bogota. Why do we have that? Because we want to create some sort of specialization. I was speaking about feature cohesion, feature or technology. There has to be some sort of cohesion within those teams so that they can start and end something, right? And I'm sorry to be so abstract on this, but that's the way it is. And that's because I want to keep flexible, right? It could be on a product level feature, it could be on technology as well, but technology meaning not just front end, one pod, back end, another pod, but basically an Android pod would have to obviously deliver an Android app. A CMS pod is responsible for the content. An e-commerce pod may be responsible for the shopping cart, et cetera, right? And then, the backbone in this case, visual design, UX, architecture, product management, that's a backbone, and in this case, we put it in San Francisco because maybe the client is in San Francisco. So it just depends on, the specifics of, where the client is, where the product is being developed, and the characteristics of the product overall. And also the time. Is this a minimum viable that we're creating here, or is this a product that's already been launched and we're creating another version, or is it a product that we're sustaining and it's already in production, etc. Right? It varies. This is just one example, very simplistic one. Then we talked about maturity, right? So how do we measure maturity? In our case, what worked for us is we generally measure velocity, standard velocity, point velocity in most cases. Another variable is quality. Quality could be measured in many, many ways. The key here is to get to get an idea of instant velocity, or we call real-time or just-in-time velocity, before the sprint ends or before the iteration ends if we're doing Scrum, right, for example. Why are we doing this? Because quality is a very complex concept. So what we try to do is get a measure of good coding practices. Does the build run? Has the build have high test coverage, etc. So imagine this: if a build has high test coverage and runs very frequently, then we have sort of a good idea that we are implementing the right, or at least we're following good code practices, and our bug level is not that high. Right before it goes into more formal QA, where we have to actually test with users, right? So if the product works and it's ready, it functions, let's put it that way, before it gets to the user groups or focus groups, then we are anticipating quality. We are not just shoving all the quality issues to the latest sprints. And that's the whole idea here. Generally, at this point, we measure quality with, for example, a percentage of green builds overall. That's something that you can get on a daily basis. And then there are two other aspects. Autonomy is, for us, is the ability of the group to self-regulate. And in our case, we measure it with percentage of core members overall, because there's a very, very high correlation between, how many core members you have in a pod versus the autonomy of that pod. So if we have 40%, we say the team is autonomous, etc. Right? Innovation, it could be measured by how many prototypes you output to the pods. I mean, what new ideas, etc. There are many, many ways of measuring how a team, how a pod is innovating. And then obviously a combination of these variables drives the maturity level. Generally, in our case, we use a maturity level from 0 to 3, and 0 is a beginner pod, 3 is a very mature pod. And then in between, there are different gates to get to these levels. Gamification is another aspect. We use avatar, we use maturity level promotions as celebrations to basically showcase the multiple dimensions. What is the fastest pod? What is the highest quality pod? What is the most innovative pod? And then we create multi-dimensional leaderboards and just basically showcase. So it's a kind of a healthy competition. We celebrate sprint ends, very typical of Agile, but with a little bit more structure than just the typical way. And then obviously there is a point system to become a core member. Generally, there is a very well-known path to become a core member. It's not just by, giving you only relationship-based. There is a point system that there are certain things that need to be completed by somebody to become a core member, like, for example, certain certifications, the ability to increase the velocity of a pod, or the ability to increase the quality, proven cases, facts, plus some leadership potential, etc. That's basically a core member. And there are, time at the client as well. I mean, if you dedicate more time, you know more about the client, you know more about the product. Obviously, that gives you more the better ability to teach others. And some examples of ecosystems at scale, which is pod ecosystems. We worked with gaming companies. One of our major clients is a gaming company. We've been creating games for them since 2007, and we had, have about 100 people working on AAA games for multiple consoles. This has been pretty successful, as well as we're a leader in entertainment. It's a company that owns many properties and entertainment and recreational parks, and we've developed fairly new innovative experiences. And our team is about 200 to 250 people, depending on what we do, and they're all distributed in 25 to 30 pods. And the creation of we've created digital experiences and e-commerce applications for them. USA Media Network, I'm not going to comment that because this is Jason's, it's NatGeo, so he's going to talk about the experiences here. One of the key aspects is, like in any in this program, is how we visualize the program, and I'm going to quickly go through the tools that we have. We generally work with very common tools, Jira and Rally, they're all good. But there has to be some sort of central dashboard where we basically have a graphical way or a way to see what the Agile Pods ecosystem looks like, and what's happening at the program level for that group, right, at the ecosystem level. And in this case, for example, what you can see here is how the ecosystem is put together, and you see the pods with names, and the links here are basically dependencies. Here you can see dependency between pod, lollipop, and chocolate. Pods have avatars and names, and we like to play with that. And you can see that who owes to whom and when. So basically this dashboard gives you the idea of, okay, so you need to deliver Facebook Friends data today, and Marshmallow needs to provide user H in REST API, and it's delayed by 3 days. So somebody overseeing the program and leads can discuss how they can eliminate that blocker, because that -3 there, that obviously is going to, at one point, it's going to end up blocking the whole progress, impacting overall velocity of the program. So here, without going into specifics, because it could get a little bit complex, what we need to understand about how we measure and how these dashboards are for is just to detect and block and understand how the whole system is trending toward the expected dates and the expected quality. Generally, dashboards are connected with builds directly, so you can actually see a demo of the product live. What's happening, a demo of that build. You can actually play with the build. In this case, leaderboards was, playing a little bit with gamification. In this case, who are the lead pods in terms of velocity, and what is their status relative to their planned point velocity. In this case, we have pods that are fast, like ice cream, each second, but still not fast according to the expectations, right? Although it's fast within the ecosystem, it has 37 points pending. So, the red dot there means, we have to look and understand what's going on there. In this case, obviously real-time feature progress is, how are we doing with the products that we're building for, or the features that we're building, right, for a particular product. And we need an easy way to understand, okay, so this is kind of management can see, all right, so, social backbone is at 72% and is on track, it's green. And then if you want to see, from product to actually what's going on and what's happening with social backbone, you have to actually see, the feature breakdown here on the left-hand side of a social backbone, how many points were delivered versus how many points are outstanding, and what is the calculation and what's the date based on the outstandings. What is, for example, if you can see there on the left-hand side, the connections has 72 points delayed, meaning should have delivered 72 points that didn't, and hence it's 10 days delay. So, it allows the backbone, that middle layer that we've seen when I showed you the organizational view of the pod ecosystem, it allows the backbone to see, okay, so we need to supplement the capacity. What do we need to do? Do we need to shift priorities? This is going to end up block connections. It's going to end up blocking somebody else. Imagine that in a very complex product roadmap where there are multiple dependencies, these such clarity and dependency mapping ends up really clarifying and allowing you to take turns very, very quickly when needed. And then obviously from product, we can go and say, who is delivering? I'm going to go back one. So it says here in the middle, who is delivering, what pods are used to deliver social backbone. There are 3 pods involved in social backbone, right? It's chocolate, ice cream, and marshmallow. So I could actually go and see what's up with, in this case, with what's up with this pod, which is chocolate, right on the top, right? So I can see what is the profile of the pod, the team members, their core status, how many core members that they have, and what's the level of maturity of that pod, etc., and what are the specific skills in that pod. And then we can start comparing if velocity is trending down, or if quality is not good. We can see, okay, does he have enough QA? Does he have enough backend expertise? Does he have enough UX? Is the UX person working out? I mean, what's the problem, right? So it allows to see, really drill down to the very, very specifics. So as you know, the level is in detail here. And then, here, as I said, this is a level 3, very advanced pod. Basically, we're demonstrating why and where are the metrics that prove that this is a level 3 pod. Generally, the level 3 and the leveling is done, we like to do it once every quarter if the product roadmap is long enough. Otherwise, we do it every month. So there is an evaluation every month, and it's not automatic, obviously. They are promoted manually and say, okay, after the month or after the 3 months, we say this pod has met all these different entry criteria and productivity or velocity, autonomy, quality, and now they deserve to be a level 2, and then obviously they're compensated accordingly. Another interesting concept is, we generally think about, how much does a team or a pod cost per hour, but actually what we need to think about is what is the trend of the dollar per point? I mean, how much does a pod cost per point? And the point is basically, I mean, if they're faster and higher quality, they will require less rework. And then obviously a pod could end up, in absolute terms be superficially expensive, but obviously in terms of productivity, they may be much better than other pods. So what we end up measuring and what we care about is how much they cost per point, how much they cost per unit of production, right? And in this case, obviously this is fake data, but just to have to showcase very easily what we mean is like as the pod matures and goes from level 0 to level 3, the cost per point is supposed to go down. And then obviously that is beneficial both for the client and for the partner. And just to wrap up here, and I know it's been a little bit quick, but there's a lot of concepts here behind. Agile Pods is all around, putting together design and engineering, driving efficiency at scale, measuring maturity, and allowing these teams to not only be motivated, but stay with the client and be progressively more productive. incorporating gamification techniques, leveraging nearshore, distributing the pods geographically and making them specialized in technology or function. It's about self-regulation, because self-regulation means that if we measure by team and not by individual, the team will definitely, the pod will self-regulate and will try to work out the issues among team members by themselves. We'll escalate and ask for recommendations of, senior members, or, even their technical architect, the product manager, the project manager. Will involve more people to fix their issues, because the inefficiency of an individual impacts the overall. And in many cases, we've experienced that pods end up ejecting some members if it doesn't work out. And obviously, it's a kind of a step up from agility. It's not just Agile 101, it's Agile at scale, and Agile at scale and innovating, creating products that impact users or are game changers. That's the type of methodology that we use. So now I'm going to leave you, I think I'll extend it a little bit. I'm going to leave you with Jason, that's going to talk about the experiences at NatGeo.
Hello, my name is Jason Gollum. I'm the head of the Program Management Office at National Geographic. My team oversees about 90% of the digital activities that go on at the National Geographic Society. Ours is really a story of how we're transforming ourselves into an agile digital operation. National Geographic, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the brand, we're 126 years old. And the digital organization has existed for about 15 years at National Geographic. And as you can imagine, for an organization that spent 100 years, 100% focused on a print publication, the transition to digital is quite a challenge. What we really didn't begin becoming agile in a formal sense of the word until about 2 years ago. We came across some references to Kanban. We started running our maintenance and production support development through a Kanban board. We tested some maintenance work through Globant. We had one individual sit with us in Washington, D.C. for about 3 months and got a good enough taste that we decided that we'd give it a bigger shot. And what really convinced us was the pod ideology, that we should at least test a little bit bigger. And we went all in, and our first project together was building the National Geographic magazine's brand new website. In the top right there, you can see what the National Geographic offices are. I'm right on the corner there, next to the top row of the pyramid-looking building. And those are 3 of the Globant offices. The reason I want to show the locations themselves, even though they may be not very meaningful by themselves, is the importance of knowing about the locations firsthand. I'm actually calling in from the Globant offices in Cordoba, where we have a team of about 10, 15 people. It's actually not one team. They're spread across different projects. We have an incredible level of support from our management to spend time visiting face-to-face with the developers, who represent about 80% of our development workforce. We have approximately 75 developers from Globant and about 15 to 20 internally. So we've invested pretty big, and we need to make sure that this is going to be successful. And it's the interpersonal relationships at the end of the day that make it successful or not. Here's a quick view of the types of resources that are part of our pods. What I refer to as pod internally at National Geographic ranges from 9 to 11 people, mixed resources. The core of the team is development and QA, but we also utilize Globant-based Scrum Masters, mostly Globant-based QA. And what we obviously insist upon is owning the vision, which is the representation of our brand, which is key to everything that we do. And so we have the product managers, we have 1 or 2 developers teamed up with the Globant staff, obviously the business stakeholders, and then we also add project management on our side. There's simply too much legwork required in our offices to think that a Scrum Master based in South America can be fully effective. You can see me there on the picture on the left with the shades, looking kind of short. That was our first visit about a year ago to the Globant offices in Buenos Aires to kick off the project, and then the kids team followed a few months later. The kids project, which a brand new website, complete redesign, complete overhaul, a reimagining of what the kids site can be, was built on a brand new platform, Adobe CQ5. We had some smaller wins, which I'll talk about in a second, with Globant. And so we went all in to build in this new platform. It wasn't completely new to either organization, but it was a very new technology to us. It extends to the designs that are embedded within the magazine, and over the last 10 years, which are embedded within our website. That's an area which I knew going in would be extremely difficult for our creative leaders to cede to another organization. We dipped our toe in the water a little bit on the NGM website redesign. Nothing much came out of that. The kids team is a much more consolidated, focused sort of subgroup within. So graphic designers, UX designers, and front-end developers to spend 2 weeks in our office with our kids team, working with our in-house design team, which already had a strong vision of where we needed to go graphically, because it maps to our magazine very closely. And they sat down together and worked through what the structure, what the visual components of the site would be in the early UX imagining of how the site's going to operate. I can't convey how important that was to the project being successful and launching on the targets that we set out for it. Not only did we have that team come in for the 2 weeks in October, but a couple sprints, we run in 2-week sprints, a couple sprints into the project, we sent a contingent of 2 people, the director or the VP of the kids digital, as well as the product manager, spent a week in Buenos Aires, where we aggregated most of the kids Globant team for the week to work through, flesh out the stories in the backlog and work through any outstanding issues and continue to rev the UX and the design. There's 3 areas of focus: inspire, illuminate, and teach. The inspiration comes from the science and the exploration that we fund. What makes us different from somebody like the Discovery Network, Discovery Channel, is we invest a tremendous amount of dollars in scientists going around the world, learning new things, exploring new places. This is what we've done, really the foundation upon which the society was built. Illuminate, which is all the content outlets for much of this information that's uncovered in the discovery and the science world, the magazine, the digital platforms, apps, online, and then teach, which is the aggregate of our education at kids area. So one additional announcement that came out as part of our reorganization, our editor-in-chief has been promoted to oversee content across all platforms, and we have a new editor-in-chief of the magazine. This is the key position at National Geographic. The new editor-in-chief, the first woman from a news background, and for the past 3 months has been running our online news site. She is keeping the online news site under her guidance as she's been promoted into editor-in-chief, which reflects the importance of digital news to the growth of National Geographic on the digital platform. It's one of our highest traffic sites. So along those lines, we started a redesign. Also, we brought in, just like the kids' engagement, we brought designers, visual designers, to work with our teams in Washington, D.C. to start fleshing out what that product would be. And we've already had our news team visit them for a full week, a product manager and product and project manager, spending a full week with them, again, fleshing out requirements and continuing to rev the design. We've additionally hired a creation assessment. so that internally we can see how something's going to work. And we actually have a testing unit team in Washington, D.C. We bring people to our office, and they actually get to experience hands-on whatever. So actually what you're seeing, this is not a final mock-up, but this is directionally where National Geographic News is going. You can see what the site looks like now at nationalgeographic.com. I'm not just showing the pictures because it's a fun group photo, but again, I'm re-emphasizing the importance of having teams spend time together. The team in Uruguay is mostly fully integrated there, which we appreciate because that's obviously better for communication. But it's not completely based in Montevideo. And so they, a couple of folks from the Buenos Aires office also went to Montevideo for the week. The nationalgeographic.com homepage, a massively reimagined homepage from what you would have seen before beginning of December. Other things that Globant is involved in, NatGeo membership, which is a significant marketing effort that we have. They'll be building 3 travel websites. The one that's not listed is Travel Expeditions, which is our existing site where we sell trips. Travel Lodges is a brand new site where it's more destination focused. And then our travel content site, National Geographic Photography, some API work, and then some cross-site initiatives like topics pages, which are basically fancy aggregate search results entities. So what works? Face-to-face, as much as we can possibly afford. We've had 4 or 5 different groups from Globant visiting our offices in DC. This is my 3rd trip in a year. My partner in the PMO is making her 2nd trip here with me, and we're making the rounds and visiting all the different sites. Our travel team, focused on the travel sites I mentioned, they're visiting the offices in Rosario in about 2 weeks. And then another 2 weeks after that, we have our membership team coming back up here to Cordoba to spend 2 weeks with their development team. An integrated Globant pod led by a Globant Scrum Master, that's been more effective than when we've tried to combine above average size teams from above and below the equator. We learned our lesson pretty early, and now we know we need to provide the business guidance. We need to be as detailed and forward-thinking as we can be, and then let the Globant teams do their thing. They're really good at running and developing. They stay on track. The Agile methodology inherently provides a plethora of checkpoints, so neither team can get off track from the other. 100% dedicated product management from the business side is key. Globant convinced our business analysts, a weekly basis, product manager, another comes to me and up for getting them the help and the assistance. And we have one fully embedded on-site Globant resource based in Washington, D.C., which has been a tremendous help for the most favored method of communication seems to be Google Hangout.
Thank you, Jason. There've been some issues with the audio, but I hope that people have understood. We apologize for that. So there's some questions here that we've been compiling throughout the presentation, and I'm going to go through them and try to answer. And if there's some for Jason, then I'm just going to pass so that he can answer those as well. So let's go with one. How can you implement into a multiple project team, and how can it be where there are graphic design requirements? So, you know, that's basically a logical case for an Agile pod. It generally depends on how much concept or graphical visual design work there is and experience work. Generally, what we do is we have several classifications of pods. What we call solution pods have much more design than development in it, but there's always a development component. You know, the key is, again, you know, that they work together and preferably co-located. A pod that's split into multiple regions is a problem generally. So, I mean, it's not a problem to distribute into multiple locations as long as the pod sticks together and it's co-located. So that's the way we would approach that. Second question is, have you ever considered introducing lean startup methodology to work together with your Agile pods? Yes, actually, they're very compatible. Lean startup methodology, I mean, I remember correctly, I mean, it's the principle of learn, build, and measure, right? And do it as fast as you can, so that you can actually steer your organization as fast as you can, adapt to market, adapt to your demographics, define new demographics, etc. You know, that's all about lean startup methodology. So in this case, imagine that with the real-time visibility of progress that you get and the ability to basically fix issues within the pod itself and in between pods, and as Jason was explaining, how important it is that for the teams to bond together and to work together. It's a great execution framework for any lean startup within the lean startup methodology. So I think they're perfectly compatible. How can Agile, the second, be presented on fixed price opportunities? Well, this is I mean, I don't want to give a long-winded response here. Fixed price opportunity, what are we talking about? Generally, what happens is that, you know, if we go too long on fixed price, we increase the risk, right? So, you know, no matter what methodology you apply, or, you know, whatever it's Agile Pods or straight Agile or Waterfall, you know, the longer you're trying to estimate a product, how much a product is going to cost, you're going to incur into issues and risks. So what we do is generally cut it into pieces. Right, so we can fix a couple of sprints that we know that what we're doing, but until you don't test the market, let's say, you know, assume that you're building a minimum viable product. It's a new product. How can you estimate and the product, we're assuming that it's going to take a year to build, and we're assuming it's going to cost $1.5 million. Of what? Right? First, because at day zero, what do we have? We just have a concept. It doesn't matter how much documentation we have. We just have a concept. So we have to prove that concept. We need to understand what changes we need to make the concept, and then that you do it, you know, you do it in iterations. So you can fix a couple of iterations. You can definitely fix a time box for discovery. You can fix a time box for prototyping, but fixing the whole product build and tie it to one number, it's something that you can do if you can get a commitment with your stakeholders that things may change. So if the policy is that instead of fighting over what's right, we are going to keep within budget and create a minimum viable that has the top priority features of our product within that money, then we're going to build for that, and we're not fighting over scope creep. It's very difficult to manage, obviously. But with visibility, it can be managed. And at the end of the day, there may be a superficial perception of control when one is going to fixed price in a waterfall, because it looks cleaner and it looks cleaner in the surface. But then, you know, the dependencies start creeping, and the product is not what it's envisioned to be, and you know, things need to change. So if we assume that change is natural, then we will know how to manage it. You know, so that's how the principle. How to make a really hard customer to open up to your suggestions and solutions. Well, it takes a little bit of soft skill and of know-how. So basically, what we generally do is to have somebody support you. This comes from Globant, I'm sure. So to have somebody from your team that has done it before, support you and tell, and basically propose to the client, but propose from experience, not propose from an idea or a concept. That's the way I would do it. It's more of a kind of an open answer. Best practice for improving the estimation of effort, story points. Well, here, I mean, I don't want this could be a long-winded response as well, but generally here what we do is we use scorecards to be able to understand what story point is very, very well. So if you standardize what a story point is, or how many story points does it take to, you know, is it one screen, etc., you know, you can actually quantify the effort, you can arrive to a more meaningful story number story points. It's a vague concept, but we end up defining these scorecards as standards that really standardize the understanding of how effort is measured. Right? Is Agile against documentation? No.
Yes, let's answer that, and then we can go to, because we're running out of time, just the ones that just popped through the Q&A. I'm going to ask you those. One is, what's the most important advantage of using pods, and how do you coordinate their efforts?
Okay. Is that one, or is there another one, or you want me to answer this one?
And that's what happened instead of having, perhaps I think my audio is not working too. The other one is what happened instead of having n pods to one project, you have n projects to one pod, or at least n projects to one large team.
Okay, I'll answer what's the most important advantage of using pods and how you do to coordinate their efforts, right? That one. I'll try to be short here. What we have measured across many pod ecosystems, and ecosystems are pods of about 15 or 20 pods. What we have found is at least it's a 30% benefit in velocity, so higher velocity, because we are actually eliminating all the dependencies among teams that traditionally would have been separate or disjoint, right? If you're waiting on an asset, you're waiting on a dependency, all that unproductive time really impacts velocity. And you don't realize that, that basically velocity is trending down. That's one. And in terms of quality, since we have embedded QA within our teams, the level of defects really decreases by the end of iteration, and that allows for real QA to execute. It's basically looking at the product and not just trying to run after the bugs, right? So that's overall. And also, there are other team dynamic benefits, like we have lower attrition because the team gels well, bonds well with the client, and they try to stay together, so they like working together. They tend to stay more together projects, and also from a maturity perspective, as the pod it grows in maturity, they get better perks and compensation, and and the client is generally happy with the output, so it just connects better long term. So it basically enables long-term relationships. So what is the other? Oh, here it is. What happens instead of having n pods to one project? You have n projects to one pod, or at least n projects to one large team. We try to have n pods to one project. We try to have n pods to one project. When you start doing, and I lost it here. When you start doing n projects to one pod, it depends. There is a limit. It just becomes division of labor, and the concept switching impacts velocity and quality. So if you're, one person has to now work on one project in the morning and another project in the afternoon, the net effect is going to be a destruction. There is overhead switching context, and at one point it's going to definitely impact velocity and quality. And then if a project has a crisis, imagine what happens, right? They would definitely go to that project issue, and basically it's much more difficult to track that way. So we always prefer that there is one pod per project or n pods per project.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Andres. Thank everyone for joining. Sorry again about the audio. We are also recording the event, so we're going to share it with you afterwards. And we hope you can hear there better. And thank you again.